For as long as I can remember, the idea that we all should buy a house has been bombarded to us from a very young age. Renting is considered throwing money away senselessly, and that it is just silly to choose to rent over buying a home. I mean, on the surface, it makes sense. Why would you want to pay for someone's mortgage instead of paying for your own? A few years ago, I visited my auntie in a small Swedish seaside town. I stayed at her home, the exact same home where she's been renting for the past 25 years. Completely happy and content with her decision, and that's when I started questioning, is buying really better than renting? And also, is buying a house always a good investment? Now, in order to help us decide whether buying a home is actually a better idea than renting, then I would like to introduce you to the 5% rule, which measures the 3 true unrecoverable costs that the homeowners have to pay but renters do not. Because let's be honest, when you rent a home, your unrecoverable cost or the sunk cost is fairly obvious, and that is just basically your rent. However, when it comes to home ownership, there's a lot of unrecoverable costs that incur and people don't really think about, and obviously some of them are not obvious. The 5% rule was first coined by Ben Felix, who is based in Canada. So this is kind of based in the Canadian market, so it might not be 100% applicable to you because it depends on where you live. However, I think it gives us a base guideline as to what you need to consider when buying a home and comparing between the two decisions. I have been both renters for many years and now a homeowner. So at the end of this video, I'll tell you exactly how much I have spent on renting and how much I have spent as my first year of owning a home. So we'll be talking real numbers and comparing between the two. The first piece of the 5% rule is the maintenance cost. And this piece is quite obvious enough. Is the cost that goes into maintain a home, to repair a home, and this is estimated to be on average around 1% of the total house value. So for example, if your house is worth $400,000, then it is estimated that your home maintenance cost is going to be right around $4,000 a year that you as a homeowner have to pay for. However, if you rent, you wouldn't have to pay for it. The second piece of the 5% rule is the property tax. In the US and Canada, if you're a homeowner, you have to pay property tax while renters do not. However, in the UK, there's this thing called council tax, which is paid by the home occupants itself, regardless whether you're renting or owning a home. The last piece of the puzzle is the cost of capital. Now, in a normal course of events, most of us, when we buy a home, we normally have to put on a down payment, and then the rest of the house value will have to get a loan from the bank, which is the mortgage. And with the mortgage interest rates as low as ever, right around maybe 2% or 2.5% now, my current mortgage interest rate is 2.14%, which is really low. However, on an average, Ben estimated this to be right around 3% mortgage interest rate across the board. So that kind of makes up the total whole 5% rule of unrecoverable costs that homeowners have to pay for. However, let's say that if you are one of those rare people that are lucky enough to be able to not having to pay interest, then there is another element that you need to think about, which is the cost of opportunity lost or opportunity cost. The opportunity cost normally presents when you have two options and is the cost of picking one over the other. For simplicity, for example, I have a choice to be living either in Thailand or in the UK, and for me, choosing to live in the UK means that I lose out on enjoying warm weather all year long. However, if I were to choose to be living in Thailand, I will lose out on getting paid in British pounds. Now, this might be a bit complicated, but please do bear with me. But there is a financial opportunity cost when it comes to home ownership, because instead of using the lump sum money to put as a house deposit, instead, if you're renting, you could use that same money to invest in a stock market, and the return on the stock market is your opportunity cost. Based on his research, if you own a home, the average return on home ownership is going to be right around 3%. And that sounds absolutely crazy, especially for those of you who live in big cities such as London, New York, because home prices in those areas is probably going to be hotter than other areas. This is the average, so we are just going to stick to the 3%. Alternatively, if you rent instead of buy, the expected return on global stock market will be around 6.57%. And therefore, if you own a home, you're losing out on the 3.57% that you could potentially gain if you invest in a stock market. So if we round that down to 3%, then that kind of makes up your total 5% rule. Okay, now that we got all the components explained, what this really means is that if you're presented between a choice of buying a house, and if the house is worth, let's say, $400,000, then you might be better off renting if the rent is lower than $1,666. If the rent is anything over that amount, then you will be better off buying. However, as I said, this is like a cookie cutter solution, and I don't think it suits everyone because it depends on where you live, depends on your local regulation, it depends on your property market. So that's why in this video I wanted to dig deep into my number to show you that in my own situation of someone who live in London, how much actually I spent on rents and how much actually I spent on my first year of owning this very first home. To be honest, I am quite nervous because these are actual real numbers. If you have followed this channel in a while, you know that I am a tracker queen. I do track all of my expenses, everything that I pay for. So these are as actual as it could get. And I do hope you appreciate the transparency, because my only hope of doing this video is that information that I'm giving will help you make a better decision whether renting or buying is the right choice for you. Because people always say buying is a better option, owning a home is an investment, but that's not always the case, and I do want you to make the right decision for your own circumstance and where you live. So here we go. So between March 2020 to February 2021, we rented a 2-bedroom flat or apartment with a garden in roughly around the same area that I'm living now, and the rent was £1,475 per month, which is right around $1,900. So the total cost of the year was £17,700. Now there was some home maintenance, or let's say like home decoration, that we kind of had to spend money on last year, and that was right around £4,000, and that includes things like buying a plant or picture frames, those kind of things. Some people might not even class it as home maintenance. However, like I said, I do track all of my expenses, and those are the expenses that go to home maintenance category. So those are actually only costs that incurred as a renter, really. Now when it comes to return on investment or return on stock market, the house that I bought, or the house that me and my husband bought, we bought it for £475,000, or roughly right around $627,000. It is a lot of money, and I'm still very grateful to be able to own a home, let alone a home at this price tag. For reference, I live in London Zone 3, although I don't have a original London postcode, but I am still 10 minutes to 15 minutes walk to the tube station or underground station. And with this amount, we had to pay 15% down payment. So therefore, the down payment for this house was £71,250. If I was to put that £71,250 into the stock market, the return on investment in the year 2020 will be £7,600. The return on investment for the year 2021 between January and February will come up to right around £1,990. So in sum, and 12,322 on renting. Now when it comes to home ownership, the amount that I'm actually paying for my mortgage on a month-to-month basis on a 2.14% interest is £1,370. So that's right around £16,440 per year. Now when it comes to home maintenance, this is shocking. Total home maintenance that we spent on this house just for this year since we moved in March last year is £26,200. It's a lot of money. Additionally, when you buy a home, there will be legal upfront costs that you have to pay, and that for us was £6,000. Now the numbers for home ownership is looking really grim at the moment. However, there is one important element that we need to add on here. As you know, most of the time house prices, regardless of where you live, most of the time the prices will go up over time, and that is the capital appreciation. A few weeks ago, I invited the estate agent who sold me this house to have a look at this house now and evaluate how much he thinks he'll be able to sell this house for if we were to sell it, let's say tomorrow. He said he could list it on the market for £525,000. However, he really thinks that it will sell for £510,000. Now, looking at my NatWest mortgage bank account, remember when you pay for a mortgage payment, most of the majority of the payment will go to interest payment. However, the small amount will go to the payment of your principal. So in just 1 year, my equity to this house, or my ownership for this house, has increased. If I were to look at my NatWest mortgage summary, we still have £396,890 to pay back. So that's the amount that we still owe the bank for the loan. The total net amount, or the total equity that we will be gaining if we were to sell the house, is £113,110. If you minus that with the down payment that we made, which is £71,250, that leaves us with £41,860 total net capital gain. And if we sum all of that up, I mean, this is quite eye-opening to me. To be tracking it this way is really good to know. The total money that we spent last year as a first-year home ownership to this house is £6,780. If we were to still be renting last year, we would have been around £5,000 worse off. So for us, in our situation, for someone who lives in London and paying a certain amount of rent, this home ownership is actually a better choice financially. But the thing is, although I am actually better off, the numbers are really close and it could actually go either way. Let's say if I were to spend a little bit more on the home renovation, I could have easily been worse off being a homeowner. And this is why it is advisable that if you buy a house, you need to stay at the same house for at least 5 years before you move, in order to recover all the initial expenses that you had to pay when you purchased the house. And remember, not all the renovation is going to add value to your house. And if I were to apply the 5% rule, it is obvious that the 5% rule doesn't work for my situation, because I was paying so little rent comparing to what the model suggests, but I'm still worse off. And this is all due to the fact that I live in a market where property prices increase exponentially year on year. And therefore, if you live or if you're planning to buy a house in a similar market, you are most likely going to be better off buying rather than renting in those markets. However, if you live in an area where the property prices doesn't increase that much and there is a local regulation that protect renters and the rent doesn't increase so much year on year, then the 5% rule may be applicable to you, and maybe renting might be a better option for you. But to be honest, owning a home is not an entirely financial decision. As human, we are quite an emotional creature, so a lot of times we make decisions based on our emotions, and home buying is one of them, unfortunately. Owning a home gives you a sense of belonging, a sense of accomplishment that you have actually owned this home at the end of the day. So it's a feeling that perhaps for many people, they're willing to sacrifice the financial side of things. And that's understandable because at the end of the day, it's called personal finance for a reason. It is personal. Sometimes you make a decision based on your emotions, and sometimes you make a decision based on the finances, and that's okay. Now, I hope this video has given you some really good information and food for thought, but none of this would have mattered if I don't really understand the importance of saving my first £100,000. Because when you hit your first £100,000 or dollars, you automatically have more options. And if that's one of the goals, if that's something that you're aiming for, then you need to watch this next video right here, because it will help you save for your first 100K in a very short amount of time, just like I did in 3 years.